Hello, welcome to Government. This is Unit 2, Part 2B, continuing our look at the writing of the Constitution. Today we're going to look at compromises. In our last video, we had talked about the Virginia versus the New Jersey plan. The Virginia plan, of course, called for population-based representation, which was favored by the large states. The New Jersey plan called for equal representation, favored by the smaller states. The argument over Congress was the biggest argument of the Constitutional Convention. By July, they had taken several hundred votes, hadn't gotten anywhere, and the large states threatened to leave. Right? Well, who knows what would have happened if they had left? All right. So what happens is another plan is proposed, and that's the Connecticut plan. Okay? It's going to eventually settle the argument between the Virginia and New Jersey plans. It is known as the Great Compromise. And what they did was they put forth a combination of the two plans. I called for a bicameral legislature, so two houses, which was what the Virginia plan had said. However, the lower house would be based on population, which is what the Virginia plan said, but the upper house would have equal representation, which is what the New Jersey plan called for. As a side note, the lower house would have the power to originate bills for raising and spending money. In other words, when a bill for raising taxes is proposed, it's supposed to come from the House of Representatives. That was important to them, but today, bills are normally introduced to the House and the Senate at the same time, the same bill. And the fact is, the bill has to go through both houses no matter what. Right? So senators do that sometimes, especially now today since they are popularly elected and not appointed by the states like they once were. All right, so once they got that one settled, the next issue they ran into was slavery, and that's going to be resolved with the 3/5 compromise. Right? The North and South were arguing over who to count for population. Right? The simple and the biggest side of the argument was that the South wanted to count the population of slaves so that they would have more representation in college, and the North did not. There was actually another side where, they didn't want to do that, but the North wanted to count the slaves, and the South didn't when it came to some direct taxation. Right? So that's how they end up, that's what they're arguing over. It ends up with a compromise, and that's the 3/5, as it's called. Because in the Constitution it says 3/5 of all other persons would be counted. Right? So 3 out of every 5 slaves would be counted for population. The executive branch itself ends up as a bit of a compromise. All right? They knew they wanted to have one, but the founders were afraid of putting too much power in the hands of the masses, into the hands of the lower class. The smaller states were afraid of putting too much power into Congress. They wanted to keep it at the state level. So when it came to the executive branch, what they ended up deciding is they put a committee together because there was a proposal for a 6-year term for president. Eventually what they decided on was a 4-year term. The 6-year term would have been one term and done. The 4-year term, they decided, you can run, and you could also have additional terms. As part of that, to control some of the fear, they created the Electoral College system. All right? It has its good and bad points. Most critics of it will point to the fact that presidents can win without winning the popular vote. Right? But that would be for a national election. We're a federal system. The states count. And so what you have is, rather than a national election, you have 50 individual elections. So it doesn't really matter whether you win the national popular vote. What matters is whether you win the popular vote in the individual states. Right? So you have to win a whole bunch of states. Right? And so what that does is it makes all the states count. If you didn't have the Electoral College, someone could win the presidency by winning California, New York City, Philadelphia, and Boston. Right? It's a very clear population in those areas that could carry it if they voted all the same way. All right? What that means is a lot of the country wouldn't count. So the electoral college system has made it so all the states count. And that's an important part when you're living in like Western Pennsylvania like we are, or if you're living in a smaller state, knowing that you're voting in your state and it counts for your state and that's it.